future of America, writing a book about it, and telling us where we're going to be in about 5 years when we don't know it's already happened. He did so, God, longer ago than I would care to admit, when he gave us all the electric Kool-Aid tests. He did it again when he told us just what was the right stuff. He did it again when he said, I am Charlotte Simmons. Now he's back again. He's one of America's best authors. He's a man who has seen the future and the present. It's Tom Wolfe. His new book is Back to Blood. Thank you for joining me, Tom.
You're welcome. And if you'd really like to see a vision of the future, go to my website. It's called Analog. You'll have radios again that you can adjust the volume by just turning it. Has anybody ever seen that before? You just turn a wheel. It's very handy. But I'm not going to put. I have a feeling it may not even go.
One of the things that struck me as I read this book was that, in fact, this is something you do have a habit of doing, is finding out what America's really about and going there and telling us two stories at once. How America got that way in the midst of a thrilling story about characters we really care about. And I'm wondering, what took you to Miami to show us this particular vision of America?
I was really interested in immigration. And this was at a time when most of the immigration stories, and sometimes they were great stories, were how people got in to the United States. But that had kind of been done to death. I was curious about what did immigrants do once they were here. I was first interested in the Vietnamese in California, who, for the most part, I guess, are still in the Los Angeles region. But I then saw that the San Jose Mercury, which is northern California, has a second edition, which is called the Viet Mercury. I really would like to get to know the Vietnamese. Then I discovered I can't speak the language, and I can't even begin to read the Viet Mercury. But I was interested in immigration, and I would tell people, say, what are you interested in that? I'd say, well, I'm interested in immigration. They'd say, oh, that's great, and their heads would fall off. And they'd go to sleep like a horse, standing up. But I had faith in that subject. And then I heard about Miami. I mean, of course, I've heard of Miami before, but not in connection to immigration. Miami is really immigration central for the United States. It's the only city, I think it's the only city in the world, as far as I know, in which more than half the population is recent immigrants, meaning within the last 50 years. And people from another country with another language and another culture politically control this vast metropolitan area of Miami. Of course, I'm talking about the Cubans. It's interesting. I mean, just how unusual.
Seems like there's a tape cut there.
Unusual that is. Russians are coming in great numbers now, and they tend to live where Miami Beach joins the mainland, north of South Beach. I consider this book a great triumph. It hardly mentions South Beach at all.
Says no viewers right now.
Very few
unfortunately.
Contemporary books from Miami do that. And
feel free to ask questions.
Realizing that I really knew nothing about Miami, I still thought it was a tourist resort. I decided the only way to find out was just to go there. And I had the good luck of there was a former journalist for the Miami Herald named second generation Cuban named Oscar Corral, wrote me out of the blue and said, I think you'll find it interesting down here. And so I went, and
I have a hard time apparently choosing what should be seen on YouTube and not. So I figured to share something that's a Google presentation. Can't go wrong with that.
Person will probably introduce you to somebody else, and it goes from there. I mean, I never arrived. I never tried to report in a white suit. I was like, hey, Tom Wolfe is here. Who'll talk to me? I wear a blue blazer, but come to think of it, I guess I do stand out because I have anybody here know what this is?
polka dot tie.
I said, right, a tie. There are parts of America where these are unknown. I mean, I just discovered them recently. And if anybody would like, I'll tell you my supplier. I mean, it's anyway.
Now, Tom, one of the things that I talked me about
Obviously,
reading
this is
book and
towards
thinking
the end of
all the
Tom's
other
life.
books
He
going
may have even
back
had a
is
stroke
that
before
your
this
books were-
particular
before there was a Google, your
book,
books were
but the
des-
book,
designed to be
don't be fooled, is
read by somebody who
very
has
modern
Google
and very
demand
amazing.
to summon up, go, oh my God, could that really be true? They're filled with these kind of details that call out their attention to us. I'd like you to talk about some of the, finding those kind of real life details and putting them in your fiction.
This guy here
and
seems
putting
so
them in your
familiar to me, but I
nonfiction,
can't put a
and telling
finger
the
on it.
story with these great little bits. And also, did you use Google when you were writing this book?
Oh my God, I'm 1 out of 8 billion, I think, who do use Google. I mean, think of all the times I didn't go to the New York Public Library. Well, one thing I have to ask you about Google. When I look things up, I've learned more about ornithology, and by using Google all the time, you can always recognize a dove. It's flying through a commercial, but it has a staggered flight, and even swans taking off. I've seen a lot of swans. I didn't know they can take off very, very rapidly. So there are other things to learn other than the facts that you're looking for. And it's very attractive to see these birds.
So you're one of the many authors who find Google to be something of a mixed blessing in that it offers you.
No, it's not mixed at all. I mean, I learned about other things.
Oh, so you.
I see something curious in the view count for this particular interview. Said 2 million and only 47 likes. That's
Something I'm writing
unfortunate.
about, even in a novel. Until I was 57 years old, I wrote nothing but nonfiction. So I paid my dues in nonfiction world, and it was fun because at that time things were happening in nonfiction that hadn't happened before. I still think probably I shouldn't say this. Let's say here's the way you get around it. If you really want to praise somebody highly, he's one of the two. Then all the other writers can say, oh yeah, he had me and I was the other. Anyway, I think Michael Lewis, who's a nonfiction writer, is one of the two greatest writers in America today. I'm not saying it for my own benefit. He's fabulous. He knows how to tell a story in nonfiction, which is actually not all that hard. That there are just 4 devices that can make nonfiction sound like the most gripping novel you've ever read. One is scene by scene construction. So instead of going from a scene to some long essay about something or other, you go to another scene and another scene and another scene. The other is, the second is extensive dialogue. You can't always get that. When I wrote a book on the astronauts, I really wasn't there when John Glenn made the first orbital trip. But 2 things helped me. One, the astronauts at that time had to go through detailed question and answer sessions because at the time, NASA did not know what they were going to find. And I taught them into declassifying those.
Really?
Yes. and they sort of scratched their head. Well, I don't know why we keep these declassified. And also, I use something that I call the downstage voice. If you're really stymied for accurate, and I tell you, even in writing a novel, I want this stuff to be accurate. You can write in the third person narrative as if you're a voice of someone or some typical character in the book. And at one point, I was writing about Junior Johnson, a stock car driver, and he's in a practice run around the North Wilkesboro Raceway, and he was the fastest driver there was in NASCAR at the time. And so I suddenly say, great smoking blue gumballs. There goes Junior Johnson. That was to indicate the excitement that he created, and it was me speaking. It wasn't anybody in the scene. That's a helpful thing in terms of dialogue. Is the most readable form of prose that there is. And you can go on and on in dialogue. I mean, long sentences, anything. People will still find it easy to read. Now, the movies can do both of those things better than the written word, scene by scene construction and dialogue. But there are two things the written word does better than anything that has yet been invented. I signed all these releases that said that you give whoever it is rights for every device they can think of, and it says, and anything invented in the future. I mean, well, suppose there's some sexual apparatus you read. I mean, I don't want to be. I always cross that out. I don't want to be involved in that kind of stuff. Anyway, notation of status details. Now, movies cannot handle that. I'll give you an example. When, I don't know what the hot loafers are today, but it was Gucci loafers. They were expensive. They were considered high class. But you can show on the screen a pair of Gucci loafers.
Nobody's going to know what the hell they are.
Yeah, they wonder why the camera's laying on those dumb pair of shoes. But they have the crossbar, a golden crossbar that links in the middle. But in writing, it's nothing to point these things out. Oh, and in The Godfather, when they want to show that this one character, he's not a mafia character, one character is decadent. They had him living in a house that was.
See, still nobody watching. FBI, feel free to jump in. Google moderators.
He's
KGB. I don't know who watches this
where
stuff.
they cut off the head of one of his racehorses, and they sneak into the room and they
British
British
intelligence.
so that he'll wake up.
Seems
You'll see
likely.
his great thoroughbred.
Wonderful
head
state of
at the foot of the bed.
Israel out there.
But
Shout
to
out.
let you know he's decadent, they have to get him silk salmon-colored sheets, a bed that you could play soccer on. I mean, and with every sort of trimming. In writing, you do not have to go all that trouble. And I say that 98% of life is concerned for everybody with status, as I call it.
Class, and it's a big part of this book.
Even people doing things that are absolutely solitary, like going to the bat room. I used to call it the bat room. At home with the family, I just say, I got to go check on the Batmobile. What are you talking about? It's in the bat room. Anyway, that's child talk. Just think about it sometime. The things that you do in total privacy of any kind that are dependent, that you do because of your idea of where this puts you in the social order. It doesn't mean you want to rise in the social order. I mean, I know I grew up in the South, and I've known a lot of good old boys. I really have. And they don't realize how they think they're dressing really casually, but they all dress casually the same way. You know, the bib overalls, and the clod hoppers, and there was a kind of T-shirt that's the really worst kind of plaid shirt you could possibly buy.
Now, Tom, what's the fourth way that you can tell?
The fourth is writing every scene. We got scenes going here from the point of view of one person. And for example, when I was writing the electric Kool-Aid acid test, which took me into these parts quite often, because of the reporting I had done, I had some scenes some information was given me by this person, other information was given me by that person, and so I would be inside of their heads. It's written in a third person, but it's if as a novelist, constantly you're inside somebody's head watching what's going on. So a very effective.
One of the first,
It's a very effective device.
I'd say, dozen books I
controversial
read
device,
as an adult.
but
Looked
you
and
have
played
to,
acid
I
test.
think,
Wonderfully
if
written.
you have been with a
Some of the
person
guys that
long
were
enough
there
and
weren't
you
real
really
thrilled with it. I don't think King Kesey
trust
was
them to the extent that they're
100%
telling
happy with it. But
the truth,
this is
not just
what
piping.
happens when a journalist
I think
gives their viewpoint
worth,
of
I
everything
think
that's
it's
going
worth
on.
using.
But I've
The electrical acid
being a
test,
fan of both King
people wonder,
Kesey and
why
Tom
is
Wolfe,
this
I
whole
thought
section
I
Sandy
still am
Lehman happens to
very
name
happy
when
with
this
it.
part is in Mountain Girls frame of mind. And that was because I didn't have information from everybody for all these different scenes. But I still think it. Sandy Lehman, for example, Sandy won't mind this, who was already published in the book, had a lot of troubles with schizophrenia and things like that. And
apparently
these
interviewed a girl named
lady,
I should say, named Jane Burton, who was on King Kesey's bus, because some of the viewpoints were clearly from her viewpoint.
Schizophrenia. So you start taking a little of that, and you're already troubled, and life becomes
Challenging.
Challenging. It does. So everything, I insist, and nobody listens, but in fiction or nonfiction is reporting. I mean, you cannot make up what goes on in this world. You cannot.
So that means you didn't make up the pissing monkey syndrome, which is something I had to look up on Google. So tell us about the pissing monkey syndrome and the part it plays in this book.
Well, I didn't go check it out in terms of science, but this was one of the characters tells about this. He's a psychiatrist. I guess he's telling what he knows. I don't know if any of you, I've ever had a pet monkey, a pet male monkey.
Heard they're terrible for pets.
If you are male and you've gotten this pet into your home, in particular something like a spider monkey.
I had a relative who had one who I didn't know, but my mom told me stories of it. Said it was terrible, especially after the man, husband died, was terrible afterwards.
To show dominance. I mean, you'll be sleeping, and I don't know how it gets up to the overhead light, but it's pissing on you. And if you try to make up to the monkey, and with good things to eat, really a lot of stroking and all this stuff, it only makes it worse. You're obviously a pushover, a real chump, and you get drenched day and night. You're just getting dressed. You're getting ready to have some meeting to go to. Only thing that works is to seize the monkey and throw him in the toilet and flush the toilet. And at first he'll be yelling and kind of complaining, and when he gets down to you've won. And now you have out-pissed him with this machine. He doesn't know where it's coming from.
I think it's probably a good thing, Tom, this came out before cancel culture, because I don't think
play in this book.
With the animal control or whoever
It's one of those things
monitors pets, I don't think they like that suggestion for pet treatment.
Tom, this is a kind of a raunchy book, and one of the most incredible scenes that
there's a little, not raunchy by any stretch, but there's a little.
Did you go to a Columbus Day Regatta?
Sex
Oh my
involved.
God! And it's a real thing.
It's a real
was a
thing.
sex
When I went
addict
to the
character.
Columbus Day Regatta is a sailboat race out in Biscayne Bay, and I guess the Atlantic comes in there. It's from one key, the name of which I do not know, to another, which is called Elliott Key. Elliott Key is it's a state park, but there's nothing on it to recommend it other than the Columbus Day Regatta. When this regatta started, serious sailors, afterwards they would always have a party on Elliott Key, and people in this party was apparently a great little party.
Like
people
one of the seasons of Ozark included a little bit of knowledge about that, because they had a party like that in the Ozark series.
When I went, and when people from the last 15 years went, nobody had a clue as to who won the race. They still have the race. Nobody knew the name of a boat. I mean, nobody even saw one. they were there for the party, and it gradually became an astounding orgy, in which, for example, pornographic movies are shown on schooner sails. But schooner sails are bigger than other sails, and we're talking real hardcore of things that you might think of as, I won't say the numbers, but 6x2, let's say, if you like, are 6.5 feet long, and they're wide enough to walk through if there's a door. And it goes
talking about the dimensions of what?
It's weird. You can't tell exactly what orifice of the human body is opening.
I see.
They're all so big. You expect to see an explorer walk into one of these.
Sounds like the ship in Alien.
Yeah, well, it's Alien, all right. And then there are always, and this is a great feature of Columbus Lyrigola, the nude water ski crowd, mostly girls, let a stitch on, and people will watch that for hours. Watch them go by, and they always smile toward the audience. And there's I'm going to go into this, but there's some males who make it worth your attention to be nude. And then on the they'll take 14, 15, I've even seen 20 boats lashed together to create one gigantic deck. Of course, it's kind of up and down deck, but it's like becomes one big party. And in fact, after a while, it kind of gets dangerous because everybody's drunk. They don't really look out for these little.
Typically, book reading people think of it as being more difficult than watching movies. I found this book so hard to put down and so non-energy consuming to read it. And it wasn't so much because it was, any sex involved. It was just the overall interesting quality of the writing and the fact it is, even though it's a novel, it includes so much truth in it because he is a nonfiction writer
specialty
at
is
heart.
Treating pornography addiction, which is a bigger problem than most people realize. It's just hard to believe, but about 1/2 of all the hits on the internet are pornographic. I mean, just think about that. And often
we are at a monument to such hits.
I'm happy to say my browser will prove me to be one of the much less porn-prone type.
And people, the real toll is taken of business people who get this addiction. They're afraid to do it at home. I mean, they can't find any sanctuary at home. So more and more of the business day, 9 to 5, is because I don't. What always, and don't let anybody kid you. What always accompanies male pornography watching is masturbation, and even the course
Using static. It's unusual for Google to have that technical problem, I would imagine.
That's not an image-enhancing experience.
Interesting.
So he has to go somewhere else. He's leaving the business for that.
That's my hands are accounted
To
for.
that extent. Well, that's the missing monkey got into that. The psychiatrist is the one who told us about the kissing monkey.
Well,
but
it's a natural progression from kissing monkeys to
in general, though, I just found that you just
Use my fingers to indicate to prove that the voice is the same person talking, because my pitch will raise as my finger raises. Of course, one could say perhaps I orchestrated that to washing the fingers, and then now I'm repeating it back. I don't know how to prove I'm not. Spell my name. Well, that won't work. That's why it says live. If there was a viewer, they could ask me a question, and that would verify it. Unfortunately, according to my view count, it says none. No comments in the chat. No question that I can see with my eyes.
And their idea of a great resort was Miami. So Las Vegas happened to be in the Mojave Desert, So, but the first great hotel built,
Static's really confusing.
Because that's what they have in Florida. But the interesting part about that is not
Static is really confusing.
It's that they are
Never finished high school.
Now, from my eyes, he looks like a total blur right now, which that's unfortunate.
Don't try to ask. But I've never heard.
You know, it's going out on YouTube. So
Look at his hair a little bit. His
I've
hair.
never heard of one.
There we go.
And
It's a little
so
better.
we're talking about creators from a stratum of society that the creators never came from before. And they really did create the modern Las Vegas. In an example of just the wealth of this country, every year the state of North Carolina, the cotton crops are due, brings in 10,000 so-called guest workers, mostly from Mexico, because there's not a living native-born North Carolinian of any origin whatsoever who will pick cotton anymore. People would rather sit on the corner with a handful of pencils than to.
Whoops. There's a technical difficulty on my problem.
In the world. I joined a niece of mine for about 10 minutes. That was all it was. My cotton picking. It's in the hottest weather you can imagine. The cotton
There we go. It's much better.
all these prickly ends. Oh, and it's in Sparta, North Carolina, which I wrote about in a novel called.
Well, it seems like this might be looking to
Sparta is in the Blue Ridge Mountains.
have an
of North Carolina.
excuse to, in the
It's too
future,
hilly to grow
possibly,
crops.
hate to say,
Except for
cancel
one
this
crop.
brilliant American writer.
Christmas
Hope
trees.
not.
And probably a third of the Christmas trees in America.
And a friend went down
Sparta,
to
North
cut
Carolina.
Christmas trees
There are these-
in that
You know, I
very
was on
in North
farms,
Carolina.
they
This
call
very
them
place.
Of Christmas trees that were 500,000 Christmas trees.
I worked with him making snow. His name is Brent Everson.
12 years.
Said it was
for them to
very
restore.
difficult work.
But every year, at least once, sometimes twice, somebody has to cut that Christmas tree in the shape of a Christmas tree. Otherwise, it's just going to be it's going to be a great big bush. And the way they do it is with delicatessen knives. A machete is too big and it hacks at things, but a delicatessen roast beef knife, about this long, they're real thin. You've got people out there with these.
I don't have to use my
And guess
fingers
who
to
does
prove
it
it's me
all
talking.
today? Latin Americans, I would say mostly.
Except my friend Brent
They're
Everson.
probably mostly Mexican.
Of course, then again, I worked
And
with
they
a lot of
really, they're
on cruise where I was
turned out
the
to be
only white guy
hard
too.
workers. They want the money. They want to send money back home, and it's terrible work. There's no machine you can bring into a Christmas tree farm, and you just have to go through all those prickly.
So bizarre to say only
like
white
thorns
person when you're talking about
Well, he
Hispanics,
gives a
because they
great
do
vision
have the
of
European
Miami,
heritage as
where
American
most of the
white people
population
do too.
is not
Seems
white,
interesting
where it's
that
run by
perhaps
Cubans. And
there's
you
such a
also have
vast
a
difference
lot of
between a
fun
European
with
white
the
person and an
media
American white
and
person.
art. You do some really fun
I
things.
feel that
Is
it's
there
almost
really
as if
no
the
hands-on
spirit of the
movement?
land
Yes, there is.
has a
I'll tell you,
strength over
it's very powerful movement.
spirit of the human,
Oh, really?
and it reflects in the speech manner and the intellect overall. It's very something very American that comes from
He has elves.
Americans, no matter what their place of origin is.
With various vegetation growing on them to give them a kind of look like fur. He doesn't touch that, of course. He also
a giant chia pet.
Yeah. He also had some photographs. He married, I think he actually married a very famous Italian prostitute called La Cucinella. And she was famous because she had messed up somebody's political career. And they were together, and he would have photographs taken of himself and La Cucinella exploring about every orifice in the human body. I mean, these unbelievable scenes. These were sent to elves in Switzerland who created them out of glass. They're kind of like the Limoges.
Oh, so those are that. So that's real.
That's real, absolutely.
Oh
real.
my God, that's.
And they fetch when, you know, by the time he never touched the
It
camera.
almost looks like
Males and
the guy interviewing
males.
Tom.
Yes,
Characters
people
Jim
do.
Carrey is played, does he not?
These objects are three-dimensional in glass, But so what that he didn't touch it? He had nothing to do with it. They sell for fantastic.
Very odd. I haven't
price.
seen this
1.7
interview because
million
at the
for him
time
to
I
a
read this
Guatemala
book,
glass.
I searched YouTube,
This is not- it is
looking
not uncommon.
for and watched so
Did
many
you
interviews
attend the
of
Super
Tom
Bowl
Wolfe during this
of
period,
art
and
criticism?
Oh, I did.
2.4 million,
couldn't-
2.7
you know,
million.
Did you
I
have an
wasn't one of them. I
AA
do
to show
not
you which
believe
ones were
that you're a
valuable?
Google
well, actually, I did.
person who has
So this is
close
an
contact
event
with
where
my
people go in,
search
they
engine.
line
Please
up,
correct me on
It's
that.
millionaires lining up,
If
as you
you're in the
describe
live
it, like
chat.
maggots.
Well, they were actually the most noted ones were actually billionaires. There were 12 in line when I went there. I had to wangle my way in and be in that line. It's the most privileged line at the Miami Art Basel, which is an international art show.
Schultz, you were down there for that recently?
Supposedly serious art. And and I'm not kidding, billionaires get in line. And these are people who are not young, but they're wearing basketball shoes because so that
Schultz.
they can get into the booth of the artist that they really want first. And the fact that they are going to rush in and pay $17 million for something is no problem. That is not a deterrent.
This is Black Friday for millionaires.
Yeah, right. But I couldn't believe it, so I wrote it to make sure I didn't forget it. It's an extraordinary thing, but they all have.
Isn't it odd that angles that
they all
are
have
very poor for the eye to want to watch something that are very conducive to
advisors,
videoing
AAs,
of other digital
who
matter?
Tell them what they like.
Direct on,
You like
best
that.
for the human eye to view
And
something
It's
is
just
nothing
don't
but a
tell me what
blur to a digital
that
camera.
may turn out to
Interesting.
be. Oh, there's also tenure art. We mustn't forget tenure art. TENURE. These are artists who do conceptual pieces, such as one that I saw and actually rather enjoyed. The artist had a heavy chain, length was about this long. On either end, he had attached big polyurethane bags filled with vegetables. And you come out, the first part of the piece of art is you come out, he lays the chain on the top of a pond. Naturally, it sinks right to the bottom. Then he invites you back in about 2 months, and you go out to the pond, and now the vegetables have all rotted, filling the
This is a way to
polyurethane bags
prove
with gas, and
perhaps
now the chain is floating
that you're watching
on
it
the
with
surface.
me.
And
That
how
should.
will it?
Oh shit! That wasn't what I meant to do. I just meant to pull up. I pushed a button. Let's see if I can get back to that. There we go. Easier than I thought.
Pretty wonderful.
There you go.
So I'd think the first time, but now this obviously cannot be sold to anybody. Just as another piece I saw in action was a pig roast, a cajachina, that's a Cuban grill, and the whole piece
People were
with
so
the
bored.
artwork was seeing them prepare the pig and seeing the pig roasting. And it takes, we talk about an 8-hour show now. And then afterwards, everyone who's there eats the pig. That's another piece of tenure art. The idea is if you do enough of these things that attract attention, maybe get you into some of the magazines, you have a pretty good shot at joining the art faculty, the fine arts faculty of a good university.
He discusses in the book how
And
some of the artists
if you
don't
can hang in there for
actually
6 years,
believe
that's all
that
it
if you
takes.
touch the piece of
That's
artwork
tenure.
yourself,
You have tenure.
then it's not pure
And when you
intellectual creativeness,
retire, you have a
because your
pretty
skills
livable
distort
pension.
the ability
So
to get your
you'll-
minds.
Depending on
So
your
they like
needs and wants and desires,
have surrogate
your life is
means of creating their artwork makes it more
Bags of
intellectually
vegetables,
produced.
chain link.
Interesting future for art, I would have to say.
The important thing is it hasn't been done. Well, I've given up. I mean, I find this all great because for a writer, it's all gold. It's absolute gold. One of the main terms at Yale today in the fine arts department, de-skilled art.
Oh, here we go.
The idea is that all this
Oh, they're going to distort it.
three-dimensional effects.
Google. What's with your Google?
the reader, that person who's done an
Technical
album,
difficulties, my
doesn't
friends?
exist. And the 3 dimension, come on, touch the damn thing. It's absolutely flat. That's deception. So what you have to do is have honest art, which is de-skilled. Just got to take the skill out of it. It's very good to take this. This I really shouldn't say, but I think that describes Picasso.
Well, you have him.
That's
he
not
shows
the
up
way
in your
to
book, too.
describe it in the book. I really hope you all read the book, because I
had
do
said
feel
this before,
Google's
but
detracted from this interview to
I could-
some degree.
I'm not
The
about me. I'm not
static
talking about-
is what I find to be the most
I-
proving of
YouTube's
that.
going to
But-
repeat it for you.
And this
I
guy,
could not draw
dressed up as
better
one
than
of
Picasso. What I
the
would
guy
do is
characters that
create a movement called Cubism, and so that
Jim
they
Carrey
don't
has
think
played.
I'm trying to draw a skilled face. I put both eyes on one side of the head, and the nose goes out somewhere that noses never go. See, the problem with Picasso was
Picasso's not that bad
He
comparatively to
art school, because at 15 he felt there was nothing more they
a
could
lot
teach.
of absolute
Unfortunately, it was that next
non-skilled
semester they began
stuff.
to
It
teach
goes for millions of dollars.
anatomy and the 3rd dimension perspective.
Although
So he had to do the best.
I won't say that he's
He had to do the best.
Tom
he can.
Wolfe
Look at it,
fully
early,
appreciates
he had
visual arts, but he's
more
got
or
his
less
opinions. He's
realistic
very,
figures
would say,
which
right
don't
wing
live
as far
here.
as you take it.
Take a look at the
He
figures.
would think that Rembrandt
They
would be
look
the
like
best
a clump
representative of
asparagus you just bought in the grocery
artwork
store.
because he's able
They're all
to
the same length. If he
perfectly
can, he
create
hides
reality, which the camera
the
does
hide the
that
hands, but
probably
he's
a
also good
touch
at the
better.
hands.
Well, maybe
and
not. Not
Sometimes you
what
just
we can do now
rummaging
with
through
the
a book
ability to
of
zoom
art,
into
you come
on
to
almost a
just
cellular
look at
level.
all the hands that are stuck behind the back. I mean, I just think it's wonderful. I mean, people think I knock art. I don't. I never make a single aesthetic judgment. Never a single. I just tell how it happened. That's what
Let me get this guy. Now,
There we go. Please.
in this book, we have a great look at American culture, and one of the things you give us are how
Much
any
makes me think of
single
Rubio.
act that any of us does
The,
can be turned
description
into
of
a dozen
Miami and
different acts, depending
Cuban
on who's telling the
ancestry
story
with-
and how it's being told. At the center of this book is Nestor Camacho.
and not in a bad way.
Something
Very
that
American
seems,
people
at
I
the
found
moment,
overall,
quite valiant and
Latino
incredible,
immigrants,
but
because
in
they
the
seem to
aftermath,
really
it
like the idea of
just
America,
gets
which is
spun
good.
10 different ways by 10 different news organizations. Talk about putting us in those news perspectives. Did you intern yourself, so to speak, with the Cuban newspaper and the American newspaper and the bloggers and all the other people that you talk about in the book?
Well, fortunately, I spent 10 years on, I guess it's fortunate, 10 years on newspapers. So I felt I kind of knew the drill from the newspaper perspective. In this particular case,
Not to reveal too much, there's a Latino police officer in this book who gets tied into a arrest and involves some possible illegal use of force, and it makes the news. And it's very coming out in 2012, very indicative of the future.
Anyway, he's on this is, and I point out
Of
it's very
America.
unusual. He's on the Miami Marine Patrol. Being on the patrol is a step up from walking a beat or something, or driving a beat. And he's in the probation period. So on the
Now he
this
didn't really tell for
safe
some reason, or they didn't include in this, that Tom
wackiest
Wolfe,
looking boat you've ever seen.
the
They go
mayor,
45
took him
miles
under
an
his
hour
wing,
on the water for
and
saving
so did the
people
chief
and
of police of
boats.
Miami,
Um,
and showed him around
so he's on with
Miami.
two
So he got to see
Anglos.
the best perspectives that
I
they
have to
can
tell
show
you,
the
the
city
Cubans would
too.
never use a word like gringo. They will say Americano if they're speaking among themselves. In general, it's Anglos and Latinos. At the beginning of Florida, Southern Florida is the only place on the face of the earth where anybody was ever called a Latina, a Latino, or an Anglo. And an Anglo is of European origin, but he's not completely white. He's not an Anglo. It's all about
He's changing in the book. He actually
Anyway,
explains that gringo
there's two
is
Anglos,
what they called.
Americanos, who outrank him on the boat.
It stems from the
He's,
Latin
the
word
third
for
man, the young
blonde.
man,
Is what the
he's on
Latin
probation.
is why all Americans are referred to as gringos and gringas. And in this book as well, at least in the original edition.
He says something that sounds to the two Americanos as rather uppity, particularly the sergeant, the command in chief. And so Nestor's on probation. He goes, "Oh my God, this is bad. If I get washed out of."
Book also
probation.
has a
So
good
they are called
perspective
to
of Haitians,
situation
who
where
were
there's a Cuban refugee.
a couple generations who've actually achieved quite a bit of success in Miami.
The boat is stopped right near a causeway. Miami has lots of causeways that go across Biscayne Bay. And they've stopped because they're not sure that the mass will clear the bridge. And so they're trying to figure out what to do. And this,
You can imagine a lot of reasons why
Cuban
a
refugee,
totalitarian
who obviously
government
paid
would
about
want to
$5,000, is brought in
change
by a
Tom Wolfe's
cigarette
original
boat. Those are really fast, small, good
perspectives. And
70 miles an hour.
Did you ride on one?
I didn't. I would have gladly done it, but I didn't ride on one of those. I did ride on the Marine Patrol boat.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'd never heard of it myself.
Sounds like fun.
It was. I mean, it's that thing is really hell on wheels. But it's a safe boat. It wasn't going to turn over. So they get there, and it turns out that if a Cuban touches American soil or any edifice that's jutting out from it, like a jetty or a bridge, he cannot be sent back to Cuba. He can be, if he's done something bad, he can be prosecuted, but he cannot be sent back.
It's because
but
at
if
the
you
time we
don't
were
do that, you're called a wet foot and you're sent back.
the reason our country set that up was because we were basically feuding with Cuba for so long that we wanted their fugitives to come here, but not as many as were trying. So it gave an excuse to pick and choose which ones stayed and
you're
left.
still a wet foot.
Perhaps.
I mean, maybe even if the schooner is owned by the governor of Florida, you're in bad luck. So this Camacho speaks Spanish, but like a lot of second-generation Cubans, he speaks 12-year-old Spanish. When they get a little older, they'd rather see American television, learn American ways, whereas their parents may be kind of stuck.
Sure, it's easier to be immersed.
Yeah.
And then
Well, it's what their friends at school were watching.
And up the mast, trying to maybe jump onto that causeway.
Well, he was a little frightened by the reaction of the owners of the ship. So he goes up on this mast. He's 75 feet up in the air. And so the two Anglos, the two American crewmen who outrank him, said, you speak Spanish. Go on up there and tell him to come down. He's tying up traffic on the causeway. It's just a block of traffic. So because he's threatened with being washed out of probation, he doesn't dare tell them that he cannot speak anything above 12-year-old Spanish. So he's very powerfully built, and he, incidentally, I don't know if anybody had any male who really wants to be powerfully built.
Climb the rope.
Top rope climbing without using your legs.
The big theme of this book.
Oh,
Get out there and rope climb, guys.
Climb ropes. Can't use your legs.
They have one of those at
Anyway,
Muscle Beach in
He
California.
does this because the quickest way to go up is much quicker to go up without
Good way to
using your
build
legs, if you have the strength.
Material
to stop.
lats, commonly referred to,
He
lateral
climbs all
obliques.
the way up, and he gets within 10 feet of the guy. He realizes
And,
if you
of
have
course, biceps also.
if you are fleeing from a credible threat in Cuba, that's the word.
Starts with the grip of the rope, so you get to forearms too.
They're not going to arrest you. The Miami police never arrest an illegal immigrant. They leave that up to the federal government. They have enough people to make enemies with them to do. So he reaches practically up to the guy. He doesn't know the word for threat. And this may seem strange because it's the same word as in English. He also does not know the word credible or credible because it's just not a word a 12-year-old uses.
Sure.
So He's actually 26. So he gets up there.
I have to say, if
He doesn't
anybody
know what
has
to
a
say to the
collection
guy.
of books,
So he
hold
starts
on to
flashing
them,
the
and if
books.
somebody comes around offering money
And,
for them, hold on to them
that
tighter.
only frightened. He's probably
Because
doubles
it's not-
who knows what he's flashing.
If you have moral
So
fiber, you have to understand that
Doesn't respect. In fact, he tries to get up
books
out of the
that are in print
Wilson chair
have a
that is
power
nestled
that
at the top of the
books
mast.
that are in a digital file do not
And he
have.
gets up
That
and he
is, that
starts
it
trying
can't
to get
easily
away
be changed.
by going down the
All videos
jib.
easily changed.
The triangulation, right?
Yeah, that
To the-
that
to the
cable.
bow.
that
Anything
goes
you
to
think
the
you've
bow.
ever created, you put on a digital file, and you think that'll last forever.
He's not strong enough.
Better hope it doesn't contend with any totalitarians'
Nesta, my friend,
ideas anywhere else.
climbs down hand over hand
Either
down
be
and wraps his legs around
That's
this
the way
guy.
it
Not very
is
big,
to
maybe
prove that you broke a law, or
30
change to indicate
carries
that you
him down
did,
all the way
or
down
change
the-
to support their
the
viewpoints.
jib line, which leads you actually into the water because it juts out over the prow. And they fall into the water, the guy fights him. He's fighting him because he's going to take him and turn him in, send him back to Cuba. And he thinks and at first his police brethren, my God, they don't use police don't use the word bravery. It's like jet pilots don't even.
It sounded outside
You know,
my apartment.
they'll say,
There's an American
"It was an
flag.
unacceptable
I
level of
found,
bravery."
curiously enough, rolled up,
That's
laid
about
there.
as close as they get.
I hunted. I had a
But
flag,
anyway,
place
they
to
were
put a
all proud.
flag, and it was already on a pole.
Who are mostly Cuban.
That's why I said rolled up, not folded.
And so he's really happy, and he
Well, it seems to hear me.
goes
Telltale
home
flag.
now after midnight, before the midnight shift, and he expects to get all this adulation.
Thomas Jefferson.
Instead, he walks in. Here's his father, his arms crossed like this.
Hi, Carmelo.
Hi, Camilo Camacho. That's the last name.
Sherman Dewey.
I and the woman who became your mother
Sherman Dewey Burton.
spent 12
Not
days
waving
at
the
sea
flag today. I don't know.
on a homemade dinghy. We had to make it in an apartment because the block wardens would have detected it if we'd not tried to do it outside. We almost died 100 times. We finally made it, thank God, to Key West. We came to land, and we all live, and your grandparents too, who are living in the house. And he's, how could you do this? You've dragged our names through the mud. And poor guy, they ordered me. Oh, yes, they ordered people in Germany too. He couldn't get away with that. They ordered me to do it. And then everybody turns against him.
This is a book
In the
that
Latino
is
community.
really involved with guilt. There's a lot of guilt in this book. You really have a lot of fun with guilt. You know, I just got to say that you had a lot of fun in this
Mind
book.
you,
didn't
that this
you? I
guy's
mean,
talking
writing
about
this book,
Camacho
putting this
is the
together,
hero
you
of
guys
the
spent
book.
a lot of
So
time.
anybody that
Just, it
thinks
sounds like
he's
this is a book that
trash
you had a good
talking
time, right?
Latinos,
Well, no, I've never had a good time writing anything. I think it's the hardest work.
it's
Really?
brilliant
In the
work. And he
world.
has
You
obviously
only
has a
have
lot of love
that
for the different
Get you
people.
through it.
The
Maybe
Russian
somebody
guy,
applaud
the Russian
when it's over.
character,
Well, now
he's
these people are
not. He's a
No,
bad
they
guy
don't. You don't have to
in the book.
They-
Actually, the whole Russian
some of them
culture,
might have
unfortunately,
questions. Does anybody out
I'd
there
have to say for
questions
them,
for Mr. Tom Wolfe?
maybe Tom Wolfe doesn't like
Thank you
Russians.
for
I don't
coming,
know.
aspiring novelist, written one really
Or
bad
maybe he
book.
just had a bad taste.
I'm hoping that the next one isn't as bad. Any advice for going from short stories up to something all-encompassing and substantial as this?
Well, first of all, you can't make a living with short stories. It's very hard.
Right? That's why I'm a software engineer.
It's very hard. But in my case, what
It's not that big
gets
of
me
a
to the
book.
point of writing something that
Tom,
long,
I think it was
is
370 pages
here I've
printed,
certain-
just back to blood, and
except
he
for my
double
book on the
spaced it,
astronauts,
and
it's always been
so
things I heard
it's shorter than
through conversation.
the first book I
That
published,
way, I
self-published,
figured it'll be new.
by
If it's new
maybe
for me, it's probably new
maybe
for
about a third the length,
most people. And
at least
wherever that's
half, at least
I will go. My
only
motto is
half,
leave the book.
under half.
I'll go there and try to just learn as much as I can.
But
by,
like I said, brilliantly written, best novel
like the
ever
man
written.
from Mars, I don't know what you're doing. I'm really interested. It's true. That's why. That's
Showed me how much I had to learn.
there.
Also,
And
Tom Wolfe
I think
breaks
it's important.
rules
this
of
may sound like
typical English
It's not
what's taught how to do it
It's important to have a concept
because he
of
has
life.
an idea of
I
what the
really believe.
reader is going to find interesting. So
In my case, it's
bends the rules
the
of what's
theory of
proper
status was developed by Max Weber,
paragraph structure,
sociologist. But there are
punctuation.
people
He uses
have
punctuation.
done
Very
great things
interesting.
with, let's say, Christianity. I mean, there's so many pieces of great literature that come out of a belief. Marxism has not done badly. That many of the good writers in America in the 1930s and the 40s were Marxists. The thing about Marxism that's good,
Tom Wolfe
much else is,
obviously
is
came
that
from a family of readers
it
because he was
forces you
named
to
after
recognize
an 20th century
class
author,
distinctions.
first part of the 20th century, also
Class
named
is
Tom
not a
Wolfe.
very accurate word in the United
I think
States.
he went by Thomas Wolfe.
What Marx, but it still you have to. It forces you to do it, and you suddenly become conscious of.
So I guess you could say he might have been almost predestined to be a writer. But
Conscious of a bourgeoisie.
see, Kerouac is actually similar to
I
Thomas
never
Wolfe.
get after the plutocrats very much. I don't know why. Sometimes I look at some Marxist literature.
I haven't read Thomas Wolfe, so I can't say.
Bourgeoisie, but it's a way of noticing how society is put together. Max Weber, I think, made the Marxist breakdown. He wasn't a Marxist, but much more subtle, because I think most of us
People
feel
taking
that
the
we
notes
are
of
in a
Google and
certain
that just Google stock.
status
I don't think
quo,
it's this university. Google.
and that we live. I think we live by a set of values that are natural to this group, which, if chiseled in stone by God, would make you supreme. Not you, your group. It's not. It's the essential thing is the group. And in a case like mine, I'm in a group as people who write. I include even journalists in the group, and serious writers. But then I also grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and every now and then, without my knowing it, I give a good example.
So did Edgar Allan Poe. Interestingly enough,
When
my sister was born there.
the
Middle sister.
two Virginians, Pat Robinson, the evangelist, and the evangelist from Lynchburg, Virginia, Jerry Falwell.
That's where I was born.
When they came out protesting a really key point early in the game, same-sex marriage as an absolute violation. Oh, it's worse than, I mean, it was different from that. They blamed September 11th, 2001 on homosexuality. And my God,
I'm living on Unocal oil.
I said, wait a minute, these two guys are not bad. Pat Robinson went to the university college I went to. Maybe they're wrong, but I mean, they're not evil. But
I didn't say Israel.
I think many of us have a
I don't blame it on Israel.
We'll find ourselves being loyal to our backgrounds, but we never even thought about it. But there tend to be these groups, people who are in the arts, believe me, they have a real different set of values.
We have another question over there.
Hi, my name is Logan. Thank you so much for coming. It's an honor to have you here.
Well, you're welcome.
As someone who spent his career interested in class and observing class in America, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about this election cycle. I feel like that's something that's really come up a lot, and even in the last 6 months and before that with Occupy Wall Street, it's very relevant. So I'd love to hear your opinion about that.
Said I had a viewer for a second. Sorry you didn't ask a question.
The press has tried to help too.
Please feel free to ask questions.
Class election, the 1% against the 99%. Somewhere the lower class disappeared.
Static again? Google, come on, Google. What's with the static?
What's this middle class?
Static? Google?
I don't get it. Whatever you want it to be, it includes
Tyrannosaurus Rex, Brontosaurus.
Anybody who is
Interesting animals.
employed, even as an intern, is part of the middle class now. And on both sides, I mean, here's Milt Romney in his first rally I saw. I mean, my God, are his beginnings humble. Obama the same way. Oh my God, are his beginnings humble? And he's
I
come
know
up
that,
from
actually.
nowhere. So isn't it Romney?
I think I would have really researched it, but
Is
I
not
really
a
wasn't
sign
watching television during
of a
the
class
time
ring
that
society.
Obama was
If your
really
credentials have
running for
include,
president. I was kind of away from the screen,
failure,
so I didn't really research
obscurity,
the man that much.
that's
Saw him
not a
speak
class
or
ring
heard him speak,
of
very well
society.
spoken,
In England,
obviously intelligent.
I probably his name's true
One
now.
of the more
When people go to visit the poor,
best
they dress up.
representatives of dignity amongst the president
In a way,
in
I'm
his
supposed to show them what they could
personal
become someday.
display
In this
is
country,
that
if
I've
we have a
seen
contractor
as good as
come
any
over
I've seen in my
demolish
lifetime, I'll
the
have to
house,
say.
everybody takes off their jackets,
Obama, I'm speaking of.
neckties,
As far as his decisions,
the shirts they
I
put
really
on.
like, once again,
turtleneck
I
sweaters.
felt America was in good shape while he
They
was
don't wanna look
president overall, so
Wrong.
I didn't have
When
reason
these
to
working men,
scrutinize a lot of
arrive.
stuff.
Of course, the working
I could have been
men's
mistaken, but
reduced to
things
rags.
indicate perhaps I was, because I very closely scrutinized
Thomas
Bush
Jefferson
and
took
found
out class in this country. It never
him to
appeared.
be
When
linked
America was finally
to
recognized by
the
England,
oil companies that were
and the British
running the
ambassador
show.
arrives for this historic meeting in the White House. He's wearing some kind of military cap from God knows when. He has a ceremonial sword. It's about this long, but it's a sword. All sorts of trappings. Jefferson meets him in his bedroom slippers. It wasn't a bedroom, but he comes out in his bedroom slippers to that great kind of portico as you go in the White House. At dinner, here's the British ambassador and his wife and all these dignitaries, mostly American.
Can we jump straight from
there.
Bush to Jefferson
He says,
to?
well, this dinner's going to be pell-mell. They said, what do you mean pell-mell? He said, well, if you see a seat you like and you're near it, take it. And they found that all the tables were round, so that there was no head of the table. This was all thought out by Jefferson. And the only person who was taken to a
See
seat
the
and assigned
5
seat
dots I
was
have beside
the
my
wife of the
speaker
ambassador. And
aren't
Jefferson
particularly
seated her next to
pulsing
him.
with
Everybody
my
else, as soon as
voice
the ambassador had to rush to a
or
seat.
this, so it gives me
And,
curious.
If it was occupied,
The
let's do that.
static
It's
truth
a
seems to
pell-mell
be associated with that.
system.
Interesting.
These things were all done by Jefferson to say that old stuff is over. We are not in Europe. He made John Marshall the Chief Justice of the United States.
Well, I like what
take
he's
the
talking about,
ribbons.
because this is
He
in
noticed
something
that
I've recently
in Europe, the chief
out.
judge will often have these golden ribbons across the black robe. He made Marshall take his off. We're not going to have that stuff.
What we are going to have is this: an America that has gone back to blood.
And
He makes it sound.
As it were.
And I explained
He's talking
that although I don't mind.
hopefully he gets a
horror
chance
fiction,
to
people
explain.
say about my book, but, it's not wet blood. It's
No.
bloodlines.
Bloodline.
I should warn you. Anyway.
I will explain something he
Ladies and
didn't get a
gentlemen,
chance
we have
to.
been graced have with us Tom Wolfe.
I've heard it straight from him in other interviews that a lot of scientists believe that there is essentially a blueprint within the blood, that's in the DNA, that is almost like when you develop a picture. It either comes out perfectly clear or it becomes not fully developed. But some scientists working in DNA and whatnot believe that essentially there's a blueprint there. And interesting that they noticed that. Well, I'll go ahead and finish this one thing I explained about that the blood, why it's called back to blood, it presents that. But to not give a spoiler for the book, I'll have to say that it kind of almost, that the title of it almost gives you a false conception of what's going to be the conclusion. So I really hope you read the book. Like I say, best novel I ever read. And sorry if my talking ruined anybody's viewing experience of that. Although it said I think only one person watched. But if anybody who else happened to be monitoring, I ruined that. I figure, well, at least I gave you a purpose to be monitoring. And have a good day and read that book. It's good.